They want me to support her marrying him. It's a request so steeped in past pain and betrayal, it feels like a fresh wound. They took his side even after what he did to me, right up until the ugly truth surfaced in the days leading up to their wedding, 2 years ago. And they expect me to just forget? Move on? Before all this with him, there was Ron. I hesitate to even speak his name. Loser isn't a term I use casually, but in his case, it's the stark, unavoidable truth. He was a black hole, sucking the life out of everything around him. Emotionally, mentally, financially, he drained me dry. Looking back, it's hard to believe how completely I lost myself in that relationship. I poured every ounce of my energy, every drop of my hope, into trying to make it work. I offered him everything, and he just took. Always taking, never giving. We were together for 3 years before the wedding that sealed my fate. Even then, he couldn't hold down a job. It was frustrating, yes, but I clung to the idea that he was trying. He'd pick up odd jobs, promise a better future. I wanted to believe him. We were young, after all, and I hoped his ambition would eventually amount to something. Then the unthinkable happened. I was pregnant. It was a complete surprise, unplanned. Before I could even process what it meant, Ron started pressuring me to get married. He insisted it was crucial for our child to be born into a proper family. He painted this picture of doing the right thing, for me and the baby. I desperately wanted to believe in that dream, in the happy family we could build together. Blinded by love and hope, I agreed. Foolishly, I believed it was the right thing to do. But the cracks that had been there before our marriage widened into gaping chasms almost immediately. The minimal effort Ron had been putting in before vanished entirely. His true self, hidden until then, emerged. Instead of stepping up as a husband, as a father, he seemed to see marriage as a license to stop trying completely. Every penny he managed to get his hands on went straight to gambling or alcohol. He'd disappear until the early hours, hanging out with strangers in bars, while I was pregnant, working full-time, and desperately trying to keep our lives from collapsing around us. I paid all the bills, managed all the household expenses, and single-handedly prepared for our baby's arrival. All the while, I told myself that things would get better, that Ron would eventually wake up and embrace his responsibilities. I was so wrong. That night is etched in my memory. I woke up feeling terribly wrong, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. Then, the sickening realization washed over me. I was bleeding heavily. A raw, primal fear clawed its way up my throat. My immediate thought was Ron. He was who I always turned to. But, inevitably, the house was empty. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number, praying he'd answer, praying he'd come home. When he finally picked up, his voice was slurred, distant, and his refusal was like a punch to the gut. He wouldn't take me to the hospital. He dismissed my pain, my fear, with a careless wave of his hand. It's probably nothing. Just relax and don't bother me, okay? He was out with his friends and I was disturbing him. In that moment, something fractured. I understood, with chilling clarity, that I was alone. Gripping the steering wheel, my hands slick with sweat, I drove myself to the hospital. Each mile felt like an eternity, the pain a relentless tide threatening to pull me under. The confirmation was swift and brutal, a miscarriage. My baby, a future I had already started to dream about, was gone. The world narrowed, leaving me gasping for breath, lost in a fog of disbelief. And then came Ron's reaction, a fresh wave of pain, even more devastating than the first. Instead of offering comfort, he blamed me. He actually blamed me for losing our child. He accused me, subtly at first, then with outright anger, suggesting my body had somehow failed him, or that I had done something, anything, to cause the miscarriage. Each word was a tiny, barbed hook sinking into my rawest wounds. I was already consumed by guilt, replaying every moment of my pregnancy, searching for a mistake I might have made, and he just kept twisting the knife. He even went so far as to say that God had taken the child from me and given it to someone else who deserved it more. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief and shame. I spent hours curled up in bed, unable to face the world, unable to even get up to go to work. Ron offered no solace, no comfort, only a cold indifference that cut deeper than any accusation. He would actually look disgusted whenever he looked at me. I was left to somehow drag myself back from the brink. I forced myself to focus on work, knowing we desperately needed the income, even though every fiber of my being screamed for me to shut down. Then, the bottom fell out again. Ron lost his job in a company downsizing. Instead of seeing it as a challenge, an opportunity to reinvent himself, he simply surrendered. He retreated into a world of video games, spending his days and nights glued to the screen, ignoring everything else. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink, empty cans littered the coffee table, and our home slowly transformed into a disaster area. And, of course, he never lifted a finger to clean anything, acting as if it was beneath him. He wouldn't lift a finger around the house, not even to rinse a dish. Months bled into each other, each one chipping away at me, leaving me physically and emotionally depleted. I felt like I was drowning, trapped in a relentless cycle of despair. The weight of it all became unbearable, and I found myself teetering on the edge of something dark, something final, more than once. It was sheer stubbornness, I think, that pulled me back each time. Even though I was clearly sick, utterly exhausted, Ron expected me to cook, clean, and anticipate his every need. It didn't matter if I was running a fever or aching all over. He demanded everything, offering absolutely nothing in return. My requests for help were met with silence, my attempts to explain how his behavior was affecting me dismissed with a wave of his hand or a cold, hard stare. Then, one day, a clarity washed over me. I couldn't continue like this. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for someone who treated me with such disregard, such callousness. I had to escape this marriage before it completely consumed me. When I finally found the courage to ask Ron for a divorce, his reaction was explosive. He became violent, physically attacking me. As if that wasn't enough, he then snatched my car keys, phone, and wallet, ensuring I was trapped, unable to leave the house without his permission. He threatened me, screaming that he would never allow me to divorce him, that I was condemned to stay with him forever, funding his life, regardless of my own misery. But the next day, seizing an opportunity while he was asleep, I managed to slip away. I ran to my neighbor's house, my heart pounding, and called the police. Thankfully, they responded quickly and Ron was arrested. Because it was his first offense, the court sentenced him to mandatory anger management classes, but that was all. No jail time, no real consequences for the pain he had inflicted. But it was enough. It gave me the legal grounds I needed to divorce him. The process was agonizing, a constant battle against his attempts to delay, manipulate, and generally make things as difficult as possible for me. Eventually, though, I got my wish. The divorce was finalized. I walked away from that marriage with nothing, not a single penny. It wasn't because I didn't deserve compensation for everything I had endured, but because I wanted absolutely nothing tying me to him. I needed a clean break, a chance to leave all the toxicity of that chapter behind me. As soon as the divorce was settled, I packed my belongings and moved to a different city, far, far away from him. Since then, I've completely severed all contact with Ron. Through all of this, I only shared fragments of my experience with my parents. I wasn't ready to expose the full depth of my pain and suffering. Perhaps I felt ashamed, or perhaps I was simply trying to protect them from the horrifying truth. It wasn't until the divorce papers were signed and the initial rawness began to fade that I felt ready to confide in my family. Unburdening myself and telling them everything that had transpired with Ron was, well, it was an experience. I could see the shock etched on their faces. My parents, especially, were devastated. The thought of me enduring all of that alone, carrying that burden, clearly broke their hearts. Even Karen, my younger sister, seemed genuinely sympathetic, which surprised me a little. Now, 2 years post-divorce, it feels like I'm living a completely different life. My career has taken off. I landed a job that's not only more fulfilling, but also pays significantly better. I finally have a sense of financial security, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It's as if I've reclaimed my life and my future. This financial stability has allowed me to support my parents. They're both retired now, and I want them to enjoy these years without the constant worry of bills and expenses. My sister, Karen, still lives at home with them. She dropped out of high school years ago and has battled addiction. She's managed to get clean and find some stability, but she's still got a tough road ahead of her. She's working as a server at a local diner, living with mom and dad to save money on rent and utilities. I know that the money I send home indirectly benefits her as well, and honestly, I don't mind. They're my family, and their well-being is important to me. This week, I got a call from my parents, and I could hear the excitement practically bubbling through the phone line. It immediately piqued my curiosity. They announced that Karen was getting married. I was completely taken aback. I had absolutely no idea she was even dating anyone. Naturally, I asked who the lucky guy was. That's when the hesitation started. There was this long, awkward pause before they nervously asked me to promise I wouldn't overreact when they told me. A cold dread washed over me. What could possibly warrant such a warning? And then they dropped the bomb. Karen was marrying Ron. My Ron. I felt like the floor had just disappeared from beneath my feet. For a moment, my brain simply refused to process the words. My sister, my own flesh and blood, was planning to marry the very man who had caused me so much pain and upheaval. I was convinced there had to be some kind of mistake. I even asked if they were joking, desperately hoping they'd burst out laughing and tell me it was all some twisted prank. But they weren't. The news came through my mom's hesitant voice on the phone, and the delay, she explained, was deliberate. Karen and the rest of the family had supposedly wanted to ease the impact, as if a sledgehammer to the gut could be softened. The big news, as they called it, was that Karen and Ron had a chance encounter at the diner where Karen works. It apparently started innocently, a friendly chat that spiraled into something more, something romantic, something disgusting. According to my mom, they've only known each other a few months, but it's true love, or so they say. The words were like a physical blow. Karen was marrying him. My ex-husband, the man who had caused me so much pain, was going to be my brother-in-law. The absurdity of it all made my head spin. How could my family condone this? More importantly, how could Karen do this to me? And why was I the last to know? Their secrecy felt like a calculated betrayal, as if they were deliberately shielding me until it was too late for me to object. I sat there, speechless, as my mom rambled on, trying to convince me to accept it. Ron had changed, she insisted. Karen saw his potential for good. She even dared to say Karen was happy, and that maybe this was a chance for a fresh start for everyone. Fresh start? It sounded like a bad joke. My stomach churned at the thought of them together. I tried to reason with my mom, to explain that Karen didn't see the real Ron, the manipulative, volatile man I knew all too well. She couldn't understand him until she had to live through that trauma. I pleaded with her and Dad to talk some sense into Karen, to dissuade her from getting involved with someone so toxic. My mom reluctantly admitted that Dad had tried once or twice, but Karen was resolute. Then came the next bomb. Ron had already had dinner with them. And during that dinner, he had apparently painted me as the villain in our divorce. I had made his life difficult, gotten him arrested for no reason. My mom even had the nerve to suggest that I should take some responsibility for the failure of our marriage. My own mother. I was stunned. How could she even entertain the possibility that any of this was my fault? He laid hands on me. The memory still makes my stomach churn. And after everything I'd confided in my sister, Karen, she chose his side? That betrayal stung more than I care to admit. Then Dad had to chime in, adding salt to the wound. He implied I was still hung up on Ron. Did he seriously ask if I was still in love with him or something, as if that was the reason I couldn't swallow this bitter pill of my sister marrying him? Of course, I'm over Ron. This isn't about some lingering heartbreak. It's about Karen dragging that toxic excuse for a human being back into our lives, and my parents acting like it's a perfectly normal occurrence. When I tried to explain this to Dad, to make him understand how deeply wrong this felt, he responded with that infuriating, condescending tone. According to him, if I were truly over it, I'd be thrilled for them. He went on about how Karen and Ron were adults, free to make their own choices, and I needed to butt out and stop making it all about myself. Easier said than done when myself was the person he abused, I thought bitterly. Then Mom weighed in, urging me to let bygones be bygones. Apparently, I should be jumping for joy, supporting Karen because she'd been too scared to tell me about her relationship with Ron initially. But now that wedding bells were ringing, they just hoped I'd magically accept it all and participate in their little celebration. Their words didn't soothe. They ignited the simmering anger within me. Karen wasn't scared of my reaction because she thought I'd be unreasonable. She was scared because a tiny sliver of her knew, deep down, that this was fundamentally, morally wrong. She knows what Ron did to me. She knows the pain he inflicted. And she still chose him. And now, the entire family wanted to pressure me into smiling and clapping along. I couldn't breathe, the injustice pressing down on me. I cut the call. Silence was the only refuge I could find. The aftermath has been a relentless barrage of calls and texts from my parents. Selfish. That's the word they keep using. I'm selfish for not being ecstatic about my sister marrying my abuser. Accusations fly about holding grudges, about being unwilling to see how Ron has supposedly changed. Instead of offering support, my family is demanding I welcome this man back into my life, completely disregarding the trauma I endured. Am I really in the wrong here? Am I the crazy one? Your kind comments have been so uplifting. Bringing this to Reddit has shown me that I can receive more support from strangers than I ever did from my own family. Let me be clear, I am not just appalled that Karen is planning to marry Ron. I am utterly horrified that she has chosen to associate with a man like him in the first place. She is choosing to be with a man who blamed me for the miscarriage of our child, as though it was something I had any control over. His cruelty cuts deep, and I cannot ignore it. He wouldn't even take me to the hospital when I was bleeding and terrified, completely vulnerable. The memory still chills me. He'd lash out, physically violent, if I even mentioned leaving, threatening worse if I disobeyed him. And beyond the cruelty, beyond the fear he instilled, he contributed absolutely nothing to our life, to our home, to our relationship. He was a black hole, sucking away my emotional energy, my physical strength, my financial security. It's agonizing to think that, knowing all of this, my own sister, Karen, is actually considering being with him, even talking about marriage. How can she even entertain such an idea? How can she possibly see him as safe, as a remotely viable partner after everything I went through? After everything I told her he did? What's almost unbearable is that Ron has somehow managed to twist the narrative, not just for Karen, but also for my parents. He's painted a picture where I was somehow partly responsible for the divorce, as if I hadn't spent years desperately trying to salvage our marriage before finally admitting, defeated, that it was a completely lost cause. The fact that my own family seems willing to entertain these lies feels like a knife twisting in my gut. Being the oldest, I've always felt this inherent protectiveness towards Karen. We've had our share of disagreements, of course, but I've always cared about her deeply and wanted nothing but happiness for her. That's why this situation is so deeply painful. I simply cannot stand by and watch her walk blindly into the same trap I did, especially with someone as dangerous, as toxic, as Ron. She doesn't deserve that kind of life. No one does. Just staying silent and cutting them off feels like giving up, and I can't do that. As much as I feel hurt and betrayed by my family right now, I can't simply abandon them without at least trying to knock some sense into them. That's why I decided to schedule a video call with my parents and Karen for this week. I need to confront them directly. I need to make them understand, to truly see what Ron is, what he's capable of. I have to remind them of everything I suffered, the abuse, the insidious manipulation, the lasting trauma he inflicted on me. I have to plead with them to see the truth before it's too late, before she's truly trapped. I know it won't be easy. I anticipate resistance, denial, maybe even anger. I know there's a very real possibility they won't listen to me. But I have to try, if only for my own peace of mind. I need to know that I did absolutely everything I could to prevent her from making the same devastating mistake. If, after all this, she still chooses to marry him, then at least I'll know I fought, that I didn't just stand by and watch. Well, the video call with my family was an absolute disaster, far worse than I even imagined. A complete and utter nightmare. I even gathered every piece of evidence I could find, including the old medical records documenting the injuries I sustained from Ron's abuse. I had never wanted to expose such raw pain to my family, but this time felt different. I needed them to understand, not for my sake, but to show Karen the kind of darkness lurking within Ron. I carefully presented my side, laying out the documented evidence of my suffering, the years of emotional and, at times, physical trauma I endured. My voice trembled as I voiced my deepest fear, that she was walking the same dangerous path I had. But instead of comprehension, instead of empathy, Karen's defenses went up immediately. She insisted Ron had suffered just as much during our marriage, as if his feelings could ever equate to my experiences, my scars. She accused me of seeking attention, reducing my years of pain to a cheap ploy for sympathy. The cruelty deepened when she repeated Ron's lies, claiming I provoked his anger, that I was wrong to call the police when he hit me. It felt like a betrayal of the sisterly bond we once shared. And then came the knife twist, her comment about my miscarriage. She mocked it, suggesting it was for the best I lost Ron's child, that I was never meant to be his wife or a mother to his child. The words ripped through me, a fresh wave of agony washing over the old. How could my own sister be so utterly heartless, so dismissive of such a profound loss? Throughout the call, Mom and Dad remained unervingly silent. When they did speak, it was to mediate, to quell the rising storm, rather than to stand firmly by my side. I craved their validation, their acknowledgement of the truth, but they seemed more focused on keeping the peace, even if it meant siding with Karen and, by extension, Ron. Dad reassured me they'd keep an eye on Ron, as if casual observation could prevent him from harming Karen as he had harmed me. Then came the bomb. Dad revealed Ron was planning to move in with them after the wedding. My blood ran cold. I argued vehemently, pointing out the sheer insanity of the situation. It fell on deaf ears. Dad, his voice rising, declared it was his house, his decision. He insisted it was the right thing to do, allowing Karen and Ron to save money by taking over her old room. They actually thought they could supervise him, manage him better than I ever could, after everything he had put me through. Once he's in, he'll never leave, I warned, my voice tight with suppressed rage. Ron is a parasite. He'll latch on, find excuses, bleed you dry, and bring chaos into your home. They were blindly inviting disaster in. Had they truly considered the implications? Did they honestly believe Ron had changed? Did they think their love would somehow magically transform him? Mom dismissed my fears, saying, maybe he wasn't as in love with you as he is with Karen, as if the depth of his love absolved him of his past actions. Maybe this time he'll be better, she added, offering a fragile hope that stung more than any insult. My frustration reached its boiling point. I told them, with icy clarity, that I couldn't stand by and watch this train wreck unfold. I wanted no part in their twisted support for Karen and Ron's relationship. If they were determined to enable Ron and invite him into their home, that was their choice. But I was severing ties. I couldn't be part of a family that embraced my abuser. The pain was too deep, the betrayal too profound. I needed to protect myself, even if it meant losing them in the process. After making my decision, I informed my family I wouldn't be sending them any more money. I simply couldn't justify financially supporting both my family and Ron any longer. My parents immediately protested, arguing that I was being unfair to cut them off as their daughter. They felt entitled to my support, regardless of the circumstances. Karen joined in, insisting that even if I wanted to distance myself emotionally, I should at least continue providing financial assistance. She emphasized her plans to quit her job and become Ron's stay-at-home wife, explaining she needed my money more than ever, especially since Ron's income was still insufficient. I was taken aback by their audacity. I bluntly stated that if she wanted that lifestyle, Ron should be the one funding it, not me. It wasn't my responsibility to bankroll her choices, especially after she chose to marry him. Karen then launched into a screaming fit, accusing me of punishing them out of jealousy. She claimed I was severing ties simply because she had stolen Ron from me and that I was still living in the past. Her words stung deeply, like a sharp slap. Yet I held my ground. I was exhausted from being the one constantly holding them together, while they continually made disastrous decisions. I refused to allow her and my parents to manipulate me any further. The more they argued and tried to guilt me, the more resolved I became in my decision to cut them off. I was finished, and I truly meant it. Since that conversation, I've stayed true to my word and completely severed ties with my family. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, and the pain of it still lingers, an ache in my heart that won't go away. But I know, deep down, that it was the right choice for me, for my own well-being. Their actions towards me were, in my opinion, unforgivable. Now, I need to protect my peace, my sanity, and my future. And if that means walking away from the people I once loved, then so be it. It's been 2 months since my last contact with them. Finding the strength to move on has been a journey in itself. I want to thank everyone for all of your supportive messages and comments. They truly mean the world to me. Okay, so I just found out from some of my cousins that Karen and Ron have called off the wedding and ended their relationship. Apparently, Karen caught him cheating just a week before the wedding was supposed to take place. And from what I've heard, she went absolutely ballistic on him. Considering everything I know about Ron, it's really no surprise at all. He's clearly a liar, a manipulator, and a serial cheater, just as I had always suspected. A small part of me, I confess, feels a certain satisfaction. I knew it all along about him. He hasn't changed one bit. I was right. Since the breakup, my parents have been relentless, pulling every string to try and reach me. Apparently, they've been practically begging my relatives to act as intermediaries, asking them to convince me to reopen communication with them. Now that Karen and Ron's wedding is off, they're suddenly eager to make amends, to smooth things over, and, most importantly, to worm their way back into my life. But I'm holding my ground. Absolutely not. I won't allow them back in. I'm fairly certain their motivations are purely financial. This sudden shift in their behavior has nothing to do with genuine concern for me. It's all about their desperate need to reinstate me as their personal ATM so I can continue to bankroll them and my sister. Well, that's not going to happen. My life has improved dramatically since cutting ties with my family. My career is flourishing, and I've also started seeing someone new, someone wonderful. I'm not willing to jeopardize my hard-earned peace and happiness just because my family is suddenly scrambling to repair the damage they inflicted. They were toxic, and I witnessed firsthand how easily and quickly they turned against me to defend Ron and Karen's awful decisions. For those who might be concerned about my safety, please don't worry. Ron can't just show up at my place. I live in a secure building with surveillance cameras everywhere. If he ever does dare to appear, believe me, I will have him arrested, and this time I'll make absolutely certain he faces real consequences. It's been 6 months since my last update, and honestly, I don't even know if anyone is still following this. But I felt the need to share that my parents recently sent me an email detailing how my father was in an accident and broke his hand. They're claiming that their insurance doesn't fully cover all the medical bills, and, naturally, they've fallen behind on their other payments. So, now they want me to foot the bill. And as an added bonus, they're complaining about how Karen isn't helping them with anything, which, frankly, doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But what truly infuriates me is the sudden flood of apologies they're showering me with. Apparently, they're realizing how wrong they were all those months ago and acknowledging how they treated me unfairly for absolutely no reason. They even mentioned how they should have listened to me about Ron and how deeply sorry they were for pushing me away. They're behaving as if I owe them something simply because my father injured himself. Where was this supposed concern before, when they sided with him over me? How convenient that now they feign remorse. It's ironic, isn't it? The moment they're in a bind, suddenly there's an acknowledgement of past wrongs. But honestly, it's all water under the bridge. Any feeling I might have had for them has dried up. The idea of opening the door and welcoming them back into my life is just unthinkable. This isn't driven by a sense of responsibility for their medical situation or financial struggles. It's clearly a calculated attempt to pull at my heartstrings and get me to open my purse again. That email sat there, unanswered. And it will stay that way. They made their choices, and now they'll have to navigate the consequences themselves. I've already spent too much emotional energy on their problems.